Hello and welcome to week 6. This week we are going to look at forms in HTML. My name is Mildred. Now, whenever you want to collect inputs from users, we use the form element, written form with a start and an end tag like this. This by itself will not display a form on the page. We need several other elements that we use between the start and end form tag that will display fields that the user will enter information. One such element is the input element, written input. This has a start tag only, so we can self-enclose using a / It does not have an end tag. It takes attributes. One of the attributes we have is the name attribute. Now, the name is specified here is the name of that input field that the calling script will use to get the input that has been entered into this field. We have the label element. This label element is very important. When we have different input fields, we use the label, which has a start and an end tag, to provide the title for that input field. And this label element takes the 4 attributes. Now, when you have a 4 attribute for a label and you have an input field with an ID attribute, the value of the ID attribute and the value of the 4 attribute matches to link this label to this input field. It is important also because screen readers or assistive technologies read out the label for the user, maybe the blind or people who are impaired in one way or the other. So you have to remember that when you have label for, let's say we want to do first name, so label for first name, the ID here will be first name like this. So the input field will have a name. You supply the name for the input field, then you supply the ID that links it to the label element, and then you can specify the type of that input. Now, the type attribute is very important, and this input field is the most widely used. The default is text. So if you don't specify a type, it's going to be text, but you have several types. And let's say we want to collect date, then the type is date. You want to refer to your course resource to see the different input types, try them out and see which browsers accept all and which browser doesn't accept some of the input field. Then you can have email when you want to specify an email and you want to see an email address, a valid email address. Okay, there are other attributes that we use for restrictions, like when we say required, means that the submit button will not be activated, or it will not go through. It will highlight that this field is missing. You have the required attribute that says that item or value must be entered here. We have several attributes like the placeholder also, where you want to have a placeholder there to tell the user something. Let's say enter your first name. So this placeholder text is just like grayed out, like a suggestion for the user. So let's go to our web page. Let's put this name to be first name like this. We go to our web page, we refresh, and we see the input field with the placeholder enter your first name. Once you start typing, the placeholder is out. We also have the value attribute, and this will be very useful when you have a scripting file and you want to have like an update form where it takes the value from the database and puts it there by default, so that at every time you have an error or you save this file, it can retain the values in the field for you to choose to update them or leave them as is. Okay, so we have some of these attributes that we use across different input types or different types of fields that are used within the form element. So let's create a basic form that will collect several information while we look at the different elements, the input types, and also we look at the different types of elements that comes between the form tag to collect different information. So let's say we want to have a grouping of the forms. So we want to have personal information. There is an element that we use, we call field set like this. We use to group related data into a form. So we put field set and then we close field set where the grouping ends. Then when we want to have a label for that field set, we use legend like this, and then we'll close legend here. We specify it, let's say we want personal information like this. So now here we're collecting, let's say we're collecting just the first name, last name, date of birth. So we have this, I'll copy this and I'll do the last name and the date of birth. So I'll change the label to be for L name, the name to be L name, the ID to be L name. The type here is text, so we'll change the type to text, and placeholder enter your last name. So we're going to do for date of birth. So let's use label. So if you want your page to be both responsive and you also want it to be accessible to those with disabilities, you always want to keep to the rules. Use the label, bind the label to an input field using the for and the ID attributes. So this label now will be, let's title the label here first name, and we'll title this label here last name. Then we want to have another label here to be the date of birth and close label. Now the input type will be equal to, we want date. The name is date of birth. Let's say the ID is the same thing as the name, DOB, and then here we have the for attribute is equal to DOB. Alright, so you want to stay consistent if you're using single quotes or double quotes. I'm just doing this for you to know that you can use either single or double quotes when you provide your values. So we have the date type, the name is date of birth, we have the ID. We can have a placeholder for one to stop there. Okay, so when we go to our page and we refresh, we have the personal information, first name, last name, date of birth, which is the date type, so it just displays a calendar. And we see what the field set did, giving this group, and then the legend gives the title. Now, because this is an inline element, it doesn't break into a new line. If you want it to break, you can put a break tag, or we can use CSS to control the default display. I'll put a break here, and at the end of each input, you might want to put double break like that. Then I'll put a break here and put double here. Okay, so you can make it start on a new line if you want. And so when we refresh our page, you have it like this, starting on a new line. So CSS is what we use to change how it appears, what our input fields look like to type into. So these are basic input fields that we have, and these are the default display that they have in HTML, the default width and everything in default. So CSS is what we use to change all of this, and we'll look at that in the CSS course. Now, input types are various types. We've seen the text, we've seen what the date is. Let's say we want to collect email addresses, for instance. So let's say label or email address, close label, input type is equal to email, name is equal to email, and ID is equal to email, right? But we also have an input type called submit, and the submit input type just gives you a button where you click, the form values are sent to the processing script. Whenever you want to have a hidden field, you don't want it to display, but you want a value that is sent to the processing script, but you don't want it displayed on the page, you use input type of hidden. So let's do input type is equal to hidden, and most hidden input type has a value, and that value is specified. Maybe you want to put a value here to say student, for instance. So you want this value to be sent, and you want it to be a default value, and the user has no control over this because this will not be displayed. Okay, so we'll say name is equal to category, and then now you want to have the submit. So you see we don't have a label for this because it is not displayed to the user. It is just for the processing scripts to have a value. So have input type is equal to submit, name is equal to, you can name it submit if you want, and then the value, what will be displayed on the button, is equal to, let's say, create account as the value. Again, you use CSS to do the styling and the colors for this. So now we have all of this, we have the button to create account. You can put a space between them using your break tag like we did previously. From here we can have double break, and then we can see it reflect here. So the hidden field is not displayed, if you notice here, because that is just to send a value. So we have this. When we start filling this field, or we click on the create account button, you will see all of these values, the names of the form, F name, L name, date of birth, email, category, sent to the URL. This is because there is an attribute for the form element, and the attribute is method, and then we'll have another attribute, action. These are the two most important ones that you see on all form elements. The method is the HTTP method, so that we use to send the form. The default is get. Get is not secured. When you use get is when you see all of your values displayed in the URL, and you can bookmark it. When you use post is when you are sending personal information or sensitive information like this, and then when you click on this button, let me refresh this page, click on this button, you won't see this on the URL. So let me go there, refresh, click on the button. It's not displayed on the URL anymore because we're using post, which means it's sending more securely. It's not displayed on the URL. Our advanced course will tell you about the different HTTP methods that we use to send data, but for the purpose of this course, you just know that there's a method attribute, and the default value is get, and the other value is post. When you want to send sensitive information, you want to use post. When you want to do like a search or you want to return something, you can use the get because you don't have sensitive information and you want the page to be bookmarked. Alright, the action now will specify the name of the file on the server or the processing script that is going to process the information that is entered here. So we'll have a file, for instance, we'll say personalinfo.php, for instance. So there'll be a PHP script that will process this file, and all the instructions on what to do with the information collected will be on this. So this is where we end this lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to look at other type of form elements that we use to collect information.